The wind had a strange taste that night. Elia's harrow, standing at the edge of the human outpost on the rocky planet of Kala 7, could feel it brushing against his face, carrying faint particles of metallic dust from the distant mountains. The twin moons hung low in the sky, casting a silver-blue glow across the jagged terrain. It was a planet that seemed to watch him as much as he watched it, silent and unyielding. Humans had only been here for a few months, establishing a small research station to study the planet's unusual magnetic fields and rare mineral formations. Elias had been assigned as a scout, a bridge between the team's scientific mission and the unknown dangers beyond the camp. For hours, he had wandered the perimeter, scanning the horizon for signs of wildlife or potential hazards. The planet was sparsely populated, or so it seemed. Occasionally, he would catch glimpses of movement between the crystalline outcrops, but nothing approached the base. That was what made him uneasy. Everything was alive in some way, yet nothing was predictable. Then, as he leaned against a jagged boulder and watched the moons drift across the sky, he saw her. At first, she looked like a shadow, barely noticeable against the dark rock. But as he adjusted his vision, he realized it was a small figure, crouched and watching the camp with careful, deliberate movements. She was tiny, smaller than any human child, and her body had an almost fragile look, with limbs too long and thin for her size. Her skin shimmered faintly under the moon's light, pale with hints of a soft green glow along her joints and shoulders. Her head was slightly larger than expected, with two enormous eyes that reflected the moonlight like liquid silver. She was staring at him now unmoving, yet her gaze seemed intensely alive, as though she were studying him in a way that humans rarely did. Elias felt his heart skip a beat. He had read about the Temi, a reclusive alien species native to this system. Encounters with them were exceedingly rare. They were known for their intelligence, their curiosity, and their almost mystical understanding of emotion and memory, but they were also cautious, sometimes dangerously so. One wrong step could turn curiosity into distrust, and distrust among Temi could be fatal for an outsider. Yet despite all that, there was something in her eyes that called to him, not fear but something softer, something like invitation. He approached slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. Every step on the jagged rock sent small echoes across the quiet landscape. She did not flinch, did not dart away. Instead, she raised one delicate hand, curling her fingers in a gesture that seemed almost shy, but undeniably intentional. Elias paused, unsure whether to respond. Then she began to move slowly, her small frame weaving carefully between the rocks, leaving just enough distance for him to follow without feeling pressured. He followed her across the crystalline outcrop, over ridges that shimmered in the moonlight, through narrow valleys that echoed faintly with the sound of the wind. For a moment, Elias felt disoriented, as if he had left the human camp behind entirely and stepped into a hidden world that existed only for the Temi. And then among the rocks he saw it, a tent-like structure unlike anything humans had built. Its surface was woven from luminescent fibers that pulsed faintly with light shifting colors like the reflections of a distant waterfall. The shape was organic, almost alive, as if it had grown from the ground rather than being constructed. She stopped at the entrance and turned to look at him. Her eyes, large and expressive, seemed to be asking him a question without words. Elias could feel the weight of the moment. The decision was entirely his. To enter would be to trust her, to step into a world that was not his, and to risk misunderstanding or worse. But to refuse would be to break the fragile connection they had just formed. He nodded gently, keeping his hands visible, and she gave a small tilt of her head, a movement that seemed almost like relief. He stepped closer, and as he entered the tent, he realized the air was different here. It was warmer, but not uncomfortably so, and it carried a faint scent of something floral and mineral at once. The interior glowed softly, the luminescent threads crisscrossing the walls casting gentle patterns across the floor. The floor itself was smooth and slightly springy, as if it were alive, responding to his weight with subtle shifts. Sounds seemed muted here, absorbed by the very fabric of the tent, except for a low, melodic hum that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It was soft, comforting, and yet profoundly strange. She motioned for him to sit. He hesitated, then lowered himself onto the smooth floor, careful not to touch any of the glowing threads. She mirrored his movements, sitting opposite him, her small hands resting lightly in her lap. For several moments, neither of them spoke, though the air was thick with communication. Elias realized he could feel her thoughts, not directly, but through subtle signals, muscle twitches, the rise and fall of her breathing, the gentle modulation of her hums. Finally, she began to move her hands, weaving them in patterns that seemed to correspond to the lights on the walls. Elias watched closely, trying to understand. Slowly, the patterns began to form images in his mind. Shapes of mountains, rivers of liquid crystal, creatures that glided through the night skies. He realized she was showing him her world, her home, her memories, in a language he had never encountered. And then he understood this was the Temi night. He had read about Temi nights in the reports, but he had never expected to witness one firsthand. It was a sacred tradition among the Temiri, marking a rite of passage for young individuals. On their first Temi night, a Temiri would invite a trusted being, a stranger, a friend, or sometimes another Temiri, to share in the experience. They would reveal their memories, their fears, their dreams, and their deepest truths. It was a moment of profound vulnerability, and also of connection, a bridge between souls that transcended language and species. Elias felt a surge of awe. This small, quiet alien girl was offering him a glimpse into her very being. It was an honor beyond words, but also a responsibility. He knew he had to be careful, to respond with patience, respect, and empathy. One wrong move could shatter her trust and end the ritual before it began. He raised his hands slightly, palms open, and she responded with a small, excited hum. Then she began the ritual. She moved her hands in intricate patterns, each gesture sending ripples of light across the tent walls. The lights formed images that danced before his eyes. A river of liquid silver flowing through a forest of glowing crystal trees, creatures that shimmered like mist, and a sky filled with countless stars that pulsed with rhythm and life. Elias watched, captivated, as the scenes unfolded like a story told not with words but with essence and emotion. As he watched, he began to feel something shift within himself. Memories of his own childhood, long forgotten, surfaced, not as clear images but as emotions. The warmth of a parent's hand, the thrill of discovering a new place, the fear of being alone in the dark. He realized that the Temiri ritual did more than reveal the host's inner world. It reflected the guest's heart as well. He was not just observing her memories, he was participating, and in turn she was shaping his experience. Hours seemed to pass, though Elias had no way of measuring time in the tent. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying a fine dust that scratched against the tent's surface. The hum of the tent seemed to grow louder, responding to the storm, but inside it remained a sanctuary of light and warmth. The alien girl's gestures became more deliberate, more expressive, revealing not just memories but feelings, joy, curiosity, fear, hope. Elias could feel her nervousness as well. This was her first Temi night and she wanted it to succeed. She was showing him her world, trusting him to respond with understanding rather than judgment. He began to mirror her movements, slowly at first, then with more confidence. His hands moved through the patterns of light, creating ripples that interacted with hers. She reacted instantly, a small laugh-like hum escaping her throat, and for the first time Elias saw her relax. She was learning to trust him just as he was learning to trust her. The bond between them deepened, fragile and beautiful, as human and alien connected without words, guided only by gesture, emotion, and light. Suddenly, a tremor shook the ground beneath them. The tent shivered, the lights flickering as the resonance of the storm outside grew stronger. Elias instinctively reached out, placing a hand gently near hers, careful not to disturb the ritual. The alien girl's eyes widened, a flicker of fear passing through her gaze. He realized that the storm could interfere with her first Temi night, that the safety of the ritual was as delicate as her trust. He took a deep breath, focusing on remaining calm. Slowly, he guided his energy into the patterns of light, letting his presence reassure her without breaking the flow of the ritual. She responded immediately, her small hands moving more confidently now, integrating his gestures into the dance of lights. Together, they stabilized the flow, creating a harmony that seemed to push back the tremors, even if only symbolically. As the storm raged outside, Elias understood something fundamental about humanity and the Temiri. He had been trained to survive, to observe, to analyze, but here, in this fragile, glowing tent, survival meant empathy. It meant connection. It meant letting go of control and allowing trust to guide action. Humanity's strength, he realized, was not just in technology or strategy, but in the capacity to understand, to care, and to honor the experiences of others, alien or not. The ritual continued through the night. Elias glimpsed visions of Lyra's childhood, of crystal forests and silver rivers, of moments of laughter and fear, of lessons learned and secrets kept. He felt the weight of her emotions, but also her joy, her curiosity, her wonder at the universe. He realized that despite their differences, they shared the same need for connection, the same desire to understand and be understood. By the time the first light of Kayla's 7 twin suns began to touch the horizon, the ritual was drawing to a close. Lyra's movements slowed, the patterns of light gradually fading into a gentle glow. She looked at him with an expression that was almost human in its complexity, relief, pride, and a quiet happiness. Elias smiled, a soft laugh escaping his lips as he realized how profoundly this small, quiet alien girl had impacted him. He left the tent with a sense of wonder he could not fully articulate. The wind still carried the metallic taste, and the moon still glimmered in the sky, but now the planet felt different. It felt alive in a new way, not just as a place to explore, but as a world full of beings with depth, emotion, and history. And in that realization, Elias understood something essential about humanity's place in the universe. It was not dominance that would define them, but empathy, curiosity, and the courage to connect across impossible divides. As he walked back toward the human camp, he glanced once more at the glowing tent, now dimmed in the morning light. Lyra was inside, still small, still delicate, yet radiating a quiet strength he could sense even from a distance. He knew that this first Temi night was only the beginning. The bond they had formed would endure, shaping not just his understanding of the Temiri, but the future of human interaction with alien worlds. He smiled to himself, thinking that perhaps the universe was not so lonely after all. The storm outside had grown fiercer. Kayla's 7 twin moons were now obscured behind dark clouds, their pale light barely reaching the jagged rocks and crystalline formations that surrounded the human outpost. The wind screamed through the valleys, carrying sharp grains of mineral dust that struck the metallic surfaces of the camp with a relentless rhythm. Inside the glowing tent, Elias could feel the difference immediately. The soft hum of the luminescent threads now pulsed in response to the storm, fluctuating in brightness and tone, as though the tent itself were alive and aware of the approaching danger. Lyra, the small Temiri girl, remained calm, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. Her hands moved slowly through the air, weaving patterns that glimmered with light, but there was a tension in her posture. Elias understood that this was more than just a natural reaction to the storm. It was part of the ritual. A Temi night was sacred, a ceremony meant to be uninterrupted, yet nature had chosen to intrude. He could sense her worry, not as fear of the human guest, but as a fear for the sanctity of the experience she had been preparing for her entire young life. Elias shifted slightly to maintain balance on the floor, careful not to disturb the fragile threads of light that crisscrossed the interior. He had already learned the basics of her language, communicated through subtle gestures, hums, and light patterns, but he had no way of knowing how to help her directly. Instead, he focused on one thing: remaining calm. If he reacted with panic or hesitation, he could disrupt her concentration, possibly ending her first Temi night before it had truly begun. He drew a slow breath and met her gaze, offering the reassurance of patience. Lyra's eyes softened at his steady presence. She tilted her head slightly and hummed, a low, melodious sound that vibrated through the tent. The vibrations were subtle, almost imperceptible, yet Elias felt them through his chest. It was a language of emotion, of trust, and he responded instinctively, matching the rhythm with his own breath and subtle hand movements. Immediately, the patterns of light stabilized, glowing with renewed steadiness as if acknowledging their shared effort. The storm outside raged harder, and Elias realized that he could no longer treat this simply as observation. This was participation. He had become part of the ritual. The tent, the lights, and the small alien girl were all connected in a delicate system of energy and emotion. His presence could influence the flow, for better or worse. The realization brought both awe and pressure. He had survived dangerous missions before, had faced hostile worlds and hostile life forms, yet nothing had prepared him for the responsibility of guiding a sacred ritual simply through empathy and understanding. Lyra began to weave new patterns, more complex than before. The threads of light responded immediately, forming intricate shapes that seemed almost alive. Spirals of energy that floated in the air, rivers of luminescent color flowing in impossible arcs, and symbols that pulsed with subtle emotion. Elias studied them carefully, noting the rhythm and sequence. Slowly, he began to mirror her movements more confidently, letting his hands follow the light, not to control it, but to harmonize with it. She responded almost instantly, her small frame relaxing as her confidence grew. For the next few minutes, Elias felt a profound connection forming. He could feel her memories and emotions, but not as direct images, more like currents of sensation. Joy was a warm light spreading through him. Fear was a ripple that tugged at his chest. He understood that she was sharing not only her experiences, but also her trust, a gift far more precious than any information the humans had collected about Kalis 7. Humanity's first real bridge to the Temiri was unfolding in this glowing tent, through the simplest yet most profound language of all, empathy. Suddenly, a sharper tremor shook the ground. Dust and debris rattled against the tent's exterior, and the lights flickered violently. Elias felt Lyra stiffen beside him. She looked to him with wide eyes, her hum faltering as she tried to maintain the flow of the ritual. He realized that if he did nothing, the disruption could cascade, destroying the delicate balance she had created. Instinct took over. Elias extended both hands, palms outward but not touching her, and focused on projecting calm. He had no technology, no tools, no way to manipulate the tent directly, but he could offer stability, a human presence that absorbed the tension rather than contributing to it. Lyra responded instantly, her small hands moving with renewed precision, guided by his silent support. Together, they restored the patterns, the rivers of light resuming their graceful arcs as though the storm had never intruded. As the storm continued to rage, Elias realized something profound. The Temiri were not just a species to study. They were a reflection of what humans could become in their most refined state. Lyra's abilities, while alien, were built on intuition, patience, and emotional intelligence, qualities that humans often neglected in favor of tools and technology. Yet here, human empathy complemented alien skill, creating a harmony neither could achieve alone. It was, Elias thought, the essence of humanity's potential, to survive not through strength alone, but through understanding and connection. Lyra began to hum again, a softer, more fluid sound this time, as if the storm itself had become part of the ritual. The patterns of light shifted, transforming into new shapes, floating cities made of crystal, forests that breathed with light, rivers that carried not water but emotion. Elias felt an overwhelming sense of wonder. These were not mere memories or fantasies, they were glimpses into a world that operated on principles entirely different from human understanding. And yet, through shared focus and trust, he could perceive them, almost as if he were temporarily becoming a part of that world. Hours seemed to pass, though he had no way of measuring time. Outside, the storm battered the planet relentlessly, yet inside the tent, a serene bubble persisted. Elias noticed small details, the way the light reflected in Lyra's large eyes, the subtle flicker of emotion that passed across her face, and the way her tiny hands moved with precision and elegance. It was an intimate and intricate dance, and he felt privileged to witness it. Gradually, the ritual shifted. Lyra's gestures slowed, the patterns of light becoming more abstract and flowing, like gentle currents in a calm sea. Elias realized that the storm's energy had been absorbed, transformed by the ritual into something entirely new. The tent itself seemed to glow brighter, pulsing with life as if it had learned from the storm and emerged stronger. Lyra's eyes met his, and for a brief moment there was no need for words. The mutual understanding between them was complete. Then she did something unexpected. She reached toward him, not with hands, but with a faint projection of light that emanated from her body, wrapping around him like a warm, luminescent embrace. Elias felt an instant connection, a flood of sensations he could barely describe. Memories of her childhood, the first moments of fear and discovery, and her deepest hopes for the future. He understood that she was sharing everything she could safely reveal, trusting him completely. Elias responded instinctively. He closed his eyes and focused on the emotions she sent, letting them flow through him without judgment. He felt the weight of her small world, the fragility and strength intertwined, and he understood why this first Temi night was so important. It was not merely a ritual. It was a bridge between species, a test of empathy and courage, and a celebration of trust. As the night deepened, the storm began to lose its intensity. The wind softened and the dust settled, leaving only the rhythmic hum of the tent and the soft glow of the threads. Lyra's movements slowed even further, her hands resting gently in her lap. Elias mirrored her stillness, recognizing the conclusion of the ritual. For a moment the tent was silent except for the hum, a shared heartbeat between human and Temiri. Finally, she looked at him and made a small, almost shy movement, a gesture Elias now understood as gratitude. He smiled, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. He had witnessed something extraordinary, something beyond the reach of any scientific data or report. He had been trusted, accepted, and made part of a sacred moment in a species' life. And in doing so, he had glimpsed not just the world of the Temiri, but the potential within humanity itself, to connect, to understand, and to respect life in forms utterly different from one's own. The first rays of Kayla's 7 suns began to touch the horizon, casting a soft golden hue over the jagged rocks outside. The tent's glow dimmed slightly, responding to the natural light, but inside, a sense of calm and accomplishment remained. Elias knew that he would carry this experience with him forever. Lyra had completed her first Temi night successfully, and he had been honored to share it. As he stood to leave, he hesitated, looking back at the small alien girl. She gave a tiny nod, a silent acknowledgement that this was not an end but a beginning. Elias felt a thrill of anticipation. Humanity had much to learn from the Temiri, and this connection, fragile and precious, was the first step toward understanding, cooperation, and perhaps friendship across the stars. He stepped out of the tent into the cool morning air. The storm had passed completely, leaving the crystalline formations sparkling in the sunlight. The wind was gentle now, carrying the scent of minerals and vegetation, and the planet seemed alive with quiet energy. Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. Humanity was not alone, and this small, quiet alien girl had shown him that connection, trust, and empathy could overcome even the most alien of divides. As he walked back toward the human camp, he reflected on the night's events. He had faced danger before, confronted unknown species, and survived hostile environments, but nothing had compared to the profound experience inside that tent. It was not just survival, it was understanding, participation, and respect. He realized that this was what made humanity truly remarkable, and in the distance, he could still see her tent, dimly glowing, a beacon of connection in a vast and mysterious universe. Lyra had opened a door and Elias had stepped through, witnessing the power of trust, empathy, and courage. He knew that future encounters with the Temiri would be guided by this experience, and he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, confident that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its technology, but in its heart. The first light of Kayla's 7 twin suns painted the rocky horizon in gold and rose, reflecting off the crystalline formations around the outpost. The storm from the night before had passed completely, leaving the air clear and sharp. The ground, still shimmering with faint moisture from the storm, seemed to pulse softly with the planet's hidden energy. Elias Harrow stood just outside Lyra's glowing tent, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on his face. He took a deep breath and looked back. The small alien girl had emerged, sitting cross-legged inside the tent, her large eyes reflecting both the gentle sunlight and the faint residual glow of the luminescent threads that had filled the tent last night. Lyra had completed her first Temi night successfully, yet Elias sensed that the ritual's true significance was only now beginning to reveal itself. He stepped inside once more, careful to move slowly and deliberately. The tent seemed quieter in the daylight, almost contemplative. The light patterns on the walls were softer now, flowing gently in subtle waves rather than the intense, intricate streams of the previous night. It was as if the tent itself were breathing, waiting for the next stage of the experience. Elias sat down opposite Lyra. She tilted her head slightly and hummed, the sound now more confident and expressive than the nervous hums from the night before. He realized that she had learned something fundamental. Trust was not a single act but a continuous process, and sharing it was as delicate as the light patterns that surrounded them. She reached out with her tiny hands, not touching him but projecting a gentle pulse of light that enveloped them both. Elias felt an immediate connection, a soft merging of their energies. This was deeper than memory sharing. It was a full engagement of their minds and emotions, a communion that transcended species entirely. As the pulsing light expanded and contracted, Elias began to see visions again, but these were different from the ones last night. They were not just Lyra's memories or the landscapes of her world. They were glimpses of potential futures, of possibilities that depended on choice, courage, and understanding. He saw the Temiri as a species, isolated and cautious for centuries, learning to open their world to humans. He saw humans, with all their flaws and strengths, being invited into those hidden places of knowledge and emotion. And in the center of these visions, he saw a fragile thread connecting them, one that could either grow into a bridge of mutual understanding or snap under the weight of fear and mistrust. Elias realized that this was the climax of the Temi night, the ultimate test. It was not enough for Lyra to share her memories or her environment. She was inviting him to understand the essence of her people, and in doing so, to help shape the future of human-Temiri relations. It was a challenge he could not approach with tools, weapons, or logic. Only empathy, patience, and courage could carry him through. Lyra's movements grew more deliberate. She guided him to focus on specific patterns of light, shapes that represented emotions rather than objects. Elias followed her instructions carefully, letting the images and sensations flow through him without trying to analyze or control them. He felt joy, wonder, and curiosity mixing with apprehension, but he did not shy away. Instead, he responded with mirrored movements and gentle hums, creating a dialogue that required no words. As he engaged with her fully, the tent responded. The luminescent threads shifted into flowing streams of color, weaving around them in intricate spirals. The floor seemed to pulse beneath them, sending subtle vibrations that aligned with their emotional states. Elias felt the full weight of the ritual, the immense responsibility of maintaining trust while participating in an alien tradition that had been practiced for centuries. He also felt exhilaration. This was a moment of connection that humans rarely experienced, a glimpse into the mind and heart of another species at its most vulnerable and beautiful. Then, a sudden vision struck him. He saw Lyra as a child, tiny and delicate, wandering through crystal forests alone, afraid yet full of wonder. He saw the first time she had sensed the presence of another being, a quiet observer in the shadows, and the first time she had wished to reach out. And he saw the moment when she had decided to invite him, a human, into her sacred world, trusting him without knowing if he could truly understand. Elias felt a rush of emotion, honor, fear, and responsibility intertwined. He realized that this trust was not just about him. It was about humanity proving its capacity to be worthy of such connection. The light pulses around them shifted again, forming a flowing river of silver and blue. Elias instinctively reached out, aligning his own energy with the patterns. He felt a new sensation, a merging of their intentions, a shared focus that allowed him to perceive not just her emotions but the deeper currents of her species, culture, and values. He sensed their collective memory, the lessons of generations, the fears of isolation, and the hope of connection. And he understood that the Temi night was not simply a personal ritual. It was a microcosm of what could happen between species if trust and empathy were maintained. Lyra's movements became slower and more intricate. She began to guide him through more abstract patterns, shapes that seemed to exist beyond physical space, representing concepts rather than tangible objects. Loyalty, courage, curiosity, patience, and understanding. Elias followed, his focus absolute. Each gesture created a ripple in the light, a ripple in the shared connection that filled the tent. He could feel her heart and mind in ways words could never convey, and he responded with equal openness, letting his own humanity shine through in this alien medium. Hours passed, though the passage of time felt irrelevant. Outside, Kayla's 7 twin suns climbed higher, casting bright rays through gaps in the clouds. The tent glowed softly, its bioluminescent threads pulsating in harmony with the rhythm of their shared engagement. Elias had long since forgotten the fear and uncertainty of the night before. He was fully immersed, participating not as a guest but as a partner, bridging the gap between human and Temiri in the purest sense. Finally, Lyra's movements slowed almost to stillness. The flowing rivers of light condensed into a gentle, steady glow that seemed to emanate from both of them. Elias sensed that the ritual was reaching its conclusion. There was one final test, he realized, to maintain presence and empathy without guidance, to demonstrate understanding without external input. He closed his eyes, aligning his breathing with the gentle pulses of the tent, and let go of conscious control. The energy flowed naturally, guided by trust and shared intention. Lyra mirrored him perfectly. She projected a subtle wave of light that encompassed both of them, conveying completion, gratitude, and a quiet pride. Elias felt a deep warmth in his chest, a sense of fulfillment unlike anything he had experienced. He realized that this moment, this first Temi night, was not just about Lyra's transition or her coming of age. It was a statement about what humans could achieve, not through dominance or technology, but through connection, empathy, and the courage to embrace the unknown. He opened his eyes and looked at her. She smiled faintly, her eyes glowing softly. There was no need for words. The ritual had succeeded. Trust had been established, and a bond had formed that would endure beyond this single night. Elias felt a profound respect for her species, and for the potential that lay in humanity when it approached the unknown with humility and openness. Outside, the crystalline landscape shimmered in the sunlight. The storm had left a sense of calm in its wake, as if the planet itself recognized the importance of what had occurred. Elias stepped outside, pausing to feel the warmth of the sun and the quiet energy of Kalis 7. He knew that this experience would influence every future encounter humans had with the Temiri. Humanity had shown that it could rise to the challenge, not with weapons or tools, but with understanding and empathy. He returned to the tent, and Lyra looked at him with an expression that was both playful and serious, a silent acknowledgement of the shared journey they had just completed. Elias smiled. He knew that this was the beginning of something far larger than either of them could fully comprehend. The bond formed during her first Temi night would serve as a foundation for collaboration, exploration, and mutual respect across species. As they left the tent together, Elias felt a new confidence. He had faced the unknown not with fear, but with empathy. He had participated in a ritual that transcended culture, language, and species, and he had been accepted. Humanity had proven itself, not through strength, but through the ability to understand, to connect, and to honor the experiences of another being. The twin suns rose higher, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. The camp was quiet now, the humans still asleep or preparing for the day. Elias walked back with Lyra by his side, small and delicate, yet radiating strength and confidence. He glanced down at her and she looked up, eyes sparkling with a mixture of pride and curiosity. The first Temi night had passed, but its significance would endure, shaping not only their relationship but the future of human-Temiri interaction. Elias knew that more challenges would come. Kalis 7 was a harsh and unpredictable world, and the Temiri were a species of immense complexity and subtlety. But he also knew that humanity's greatest strength had been revealed here, the capacity to connect, to empathize, and to rise to challenges not with aggression but with understanding. In this quiet, glowing tent on a distant planet, humanity had taken its first step toward true interstellar companionship. As they walked toward the outpost, Elias felt a sense of wonder and hope. The universe was vast and filled with mysteries, but he understood now that the key to navigating it was not only intelligence or technology. It was heart, courage, and the willingness to trust and be trusted. And with that understanding, humanity could meet any challenge anywhere with honor and grace. The day began fully as the twin suns bathed the landscape in golden light. Elias and Lyra paused for a moment on a small ridge overlooking the crystalline formations. The wind was gentle, carrying the soft scent of minerals and vegetation, and for a brief instant, the planet seemed to hold its breath. They looked at each other and shared a silent acknowledgement, a mutual understanding that transcended language. Humanity had proven itself. One small alien girl had trusted him with her first Temi night, and he had risen to the occasion. It was not the victory of conquest, but the triumph of connection, empathy, and courage. Elias knew that this moment, fragile yet powerful, would echo across the stars, shaping the future of interspecies relationships and reaffirming what made humans remarkable. And for the first time, he truly believed that the universe, vast and mysterious, was not so lonely after all.